Syria's 6-year war has brought immeasurable suffering and nearly 500,000 deaths. Evidence of torture and killings has been surfacing for years. But Amnesty International has new findings of mass executions by the Syrian regime inside one secret prison, Saydnaya. The rights group says up to 13,000 people were hanged between 2011 and 2015. In that time, Amnesty reports that between 20 to 50 people were executed every week, and that inmates tried inside the prison's military field court didn't see a fair judicial process. All this inside a hidden military facility just 30 kilometers from Damascus, where the inmates are overwhelmingly civilians.
Human rights defenders, longtime political dissidents, journalists, students, demonstrators, they've not committed any crime other than being perceived to oppose the Syrian government.
Amnesty says its findings are based on first-hand testimonies from dozens of former guards, judges, and detainees. I spoke to Diab Seri, who spent 5 years in Saydnaya. His crime, leading an opposition youth group.
فطبعا أول ما يعني السجن هذا يعني رهيب وفي ما بتسمع غير صوت الضرب والتعذيب وناس عم تتعذب يعني ببداية دخولك لهذا السجن. يعني بهي الحالة بتتم يعني أنت ضمن المنفردات ممكن تتم حوالي سنة، ممكن تتم شهر، ممكن تتم سنتين. المساء يعني نحن كنا مثلا خلال وجودنا بالمنفردة ما نعرف الصبح من المساء غير من وجبات الأكل مثلا. يعني الحياة بهذا السجن خلال فترة المنفردات والفترة اللي بعدها ما فيني إلا غير أنت إنك عايش بقبر حقيقي.
What this report reveals is that the government has launched a coordinated and organized campaign to kill detainees in its custody.
Amnesty is holding Syria's highest officials responsible, but the government's denial and lack of access to the facility may stop any international investigation into Saydnaya. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me here in the studio is Bassam Al-Ahmed. He's the Executive Director of Syrians for Truth and Justice, an organization documenting human rights violations in Syria. And from Seoul is international criminal law expert Toby Cadman. He's trying to prosecute the Assad regime for crimes against humanity. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Bassam, let me start with you. I read the executive summary of the Amnesty report, read other reports about the place. Unimaginable suffering and torture going on, and then, of course, 13,000 hangings between 2011 and 2015. Does that sound like the Saydnaya you know?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, I think so. In somehow, yes, because I was myself detained by another security branches, so I know in how much is like the scale of this kind of torture and abuses. But for the most important thing in this report about these testimonies from Saydnaya prison, we have a lot of other like documentation. We have a lot of like reports, Caesar reports, and many photos like emerge from this kind of secret detention centers. But it's like the first time we see this kind of investigation about Saydnaya prison, which we like usually it was like a place for the people who are detained as a result of like some Islamic activities in Syria. Mm-hmm. But since September 2011 until now, it's operated for the people from the revolution. The contradiction is that most of the people, I mean, according to our like reports and people we met, most of those people who transferred to Saydnaya, they are like peaceful activists, normal peaceful activists, most of them arrested in the beginning of the revolution in 2011, but the regime considered them as the people who like did the revolution.
Yeah.
So
and I want to expand on that in a few minutes' time and look at who the people were and how they differ from some of the militants and others. I want to get into that in a moment. But Toby, let's look at the Syrian government's response. We have to give them the right of response here. So I'm going to quote the Justice Ministry. They said this report was devoid of truth. Amnesty's accusations were not based on real evidence, but rather on personal emotions aimed at achieving known political goals. They also described the report as an attempt at harming Syria's reputation on the international stage, especially after the victories of the Syrian army. Toby, is there any chance that they're right at all?
No, absolutely none.
Tell me why.
It's the kind of response that we would expect, and it's consistent with the approach that they've taken. The evidence is highly credible. We're not just talking about victim accounts. We're talking about insider witnesses, guards, judges, lawyers who are part of the process, who have come forward and given this evidence. Of course, they have to have their chance in court to defend, but to say that it is devoid of any merit and it's an attempt to sully the reputation of the Syrian government is utterly ridiculous. The position that they've always taken is that all of these allegations are false. They're fighting a war on terror, and all of those who have made these allegations are aligned with militant and extreme groups. But as Bassam has quite rightly said, we're talking about individuals, we're talking about civilians, we're talking about those that have opposed the Syrian regime. And of course, there has to be a process of accountability to hold all of these individuals accountable. And this report is extremely important in that process. I can add that we have filed a case just last week in Spain in relation to a different facility, but a facility under the control of military intelligence and security forces. And these allegations are highly credible. You had just yesterday, I believe, the former US ambassador for war crimes, Stephen Rapp, who said that this evidence is more compelling than what we heard in Nuremberg. So this is not something that's going to go away.
And you're confident you can hold the regime to account under international law?
Absolutely. I mean, the problem that we have is that the ability to have this on the international platform, which is where it should be, at the International Criminal Court, has consistently been scuppered by Russia and their involvement, and they will have to answer for their crimes as well. And so what we've had to do is turn to the national jurisdiction, which is why we've looked at Spain. We have one case in Spain. We're looking at other cases, in particular the case of Dr. Abbas Khan, which we hope to prosecute in the United Kingdom. And now we have the United Nations mechanism that has been established to look into these matters. So of course, these individuals will be held accountable. And of course, anyone on any side of the conflict that committed war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide will be held accountable. And we are confident the evidence we have and the evidence which is contained in the Amnesty report is extremely compelling.
Bassam, let's now look at what you brought up, the fact that the identities of these people in the prisons, unlike what the Syrian regime says, seem not to be the worst of the worst or the most militant jihadis, to use their terminology. I was reading another Roy Gutman piece in the Daily Beast very recently, an interview with defectors. There's more suggestions that Assad released the worst of the worst in the early days to attack US forces in Iraq. And of course, there was another prison break or prison release in order to tarnish the uprising. The suggestion that whoever was left behind in Saydnaya were the kind of moderate, I hate that terminology, but the sort of moderate opposition who wanted democracy. So you believe those are the people that were tortured and killed?
Yeah, but I mean, back to 2011, actually, yeah, what the regime did is they released like hundreds of jihadist people in 2011, and they arrested those kind of people. Actually, they are not moderate. The majority are civilians, and including these civilians, people who like randomly arrested. So I was myself arrested by the Air Force Intelligence Branch.
What were the charges against you?
Just with getting funds from the international bodies and some like many other like funny charges. I mean,
why did they release you?
I don't know. Just like they released me because my background. But I mean, we are not also talking about like political activists or people from the moderate opposition. Yes, we have some activists, people peacefully did like demonstration at the beginning of the revolution, but also including these people, we are talking about thousands of people randomly arrested by the regime forces. And we know like the majority, especially in military branches, in Al-Arba'in branches, in Jisr al-Abyad, in Damascus, they are just like taking people from the street because they are belonging to this area or this area. So why I'm trying to tell you about that, because this is like a piece of it's a part of full picture. They are taking people from the street, they're taking them to these security branches, they're beating them, torturing them, they are trying to take the information. The people under torture give them the wrong information. They said, we killed these people and soldiers, and, which is not true. And then they are taking these people to what's so-called field military court, which is not court, it's just like a normal, it take about 2 or 3 minutes, and then they're transferring them to the Saydnaya prison. So
there's 2 or 3 minutes in court.
Yeah, what's so-called court? It's not called a court, but they call them field military courts. The maximum time for some kinds of these sessions about 3 minutes, sometimes 1 minute.
So you're judged in 3 minutes?
Yeah, not me, but
the prisoners judged
exactly.
in 3 minutes.
Majority of those people transferred to Saydnaya, presented at this field military court. Then they transferring them to this to Saydnaya. Actually, Saydnaya is like 2 main parts. We have like what called al-Sijn al-Ahmar, the red part of the prison, and also the white part. Usually the red part for or red building for the people who are like the normal people. The white building is for the people, soldiers who try to defect or commit some crimes inside the army. And the white building, it is the place where the hanging took over.
Now, Toby, I want to ask you if you feel that some of your efforts might be frustrated by the fact that just so many years on, people seem not to care that much. I mean, they've seen images of children being pulled out of the rubble after barrel bombings. They've seen the Caesar pictures. I was handed a book, a thick book with the names of, I think, 250,000 people who had been killed, the first 250,000 who had been killed during the Syrian war. Despite all of that, people are going to read this report and go, okay, so another 13,000 hangings. What does that mean? Because Syria is a big mess. We're into the hundreds of thousands of dead. What difference does this make? Are you frustrated by the fact that there is this almost a sort of shoulder shrug from so many people when it comes to Syrian atrocities now?
Yes, I mean, I'm hugely frustrated. I've been working on Syrian matters now since early on in the revolution as a lawyer, and it is hugely frustrating. But I don't think that people will look at this report and be able to look away. I mean, what's important about this report, first of all, it's an independent report that has looked at credible evidence from a number of different sources. It's also important that this corroborates a lot of what we've found in our own investigation. So from a personal standpoint, on the cases that my organisation, Guernica 37, is dealing with, it does corroborate a lot of what we're saying. But what's particularly important about this is not just another report saying that several thousand people have been killed, several thousand people have been tortured, but what it demonstrates is that it is part of a state policy. It goes right to the very, very top. And I think that should not be underestimated. And of course, there are those that look at, well, if we don't have Assad, what do we have? A lot of people have made that kind of suggestion. But there can be no peace, there can be no reconciliation in Syria unless there is justice and accountability. And those individuals that bear criminal responsibility that goes right to the top are clearly exposed in this report. What we were able to find from our own investigations for the case that we filed in Spain last week, I mean, we list 9 senior members, one of whom falls just short of the president, who run the military and security intelligence. This is not just picking up random individuals. This is a policy. And as we've seen, I mean, we haven't seen anything like this since the Holocaust. I mean, this is how significant this is.
That's a big statement. Toby, I got to jump in there. I've got to wrap you. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to end it on that note because unfortunately we are out of time. Toby Cadman and Bassam Al Ahmed, it's been a pleasure having both of you on the program.
Thank you.